For those who don't know me, my name is Ila Kharbush, and I work with Thomson Reuters Tax and Accounting, and I'm responsible for the strategic relationships with the firm across the country. So I look after the state societies, CPA associations, as well as affiliations across the country for TR. If you haven't been able to tell already, I'm not from the United States, as you can tell from my accent. I was actually born and raised in Durban, South Africa. And being raised in Durban, South Africa, I represent a minority of TCK, so third culture kids, because both of my parents are actually originally from the Seychelles. So immediately that set me apart as somewhat different to those other people in my home state, if I would say. I represented about 0.06% of the global population. So from a young age, I knew that I was going to have to spend a lot of time assimilating myself to fit in with the remaining 99.994% of the global population. Growing up in South Africa, I would say it really helped that, or made it a lot easier, because South Africa is a country that's rich in cultural diversity, and there's 11 official languages. So being around that all the time, you're immediately embracing cultural diversity. So from a very young age, I'd say probably from before the age of 5, there were certain personal traits which I adopted, which definitely helped strengthen my CQ muscle without even realizing. And I wanted to share a couple of those with you before I get into the rest of today's presentation. The first of which is seeking connection amongst your community. In South Africa, there's a term called Ubuntu, which means by being kind and compassionate to others in your community, you inevitably help your community, but you also help yourself because you strengthen others in the community and inevitably help by strengthening yourself. So it does always help to seek connection. The second thing I'd say is deliberate curiosity. For anyone who knows me, I'm incredibly curious. Curious beyond just wanting to know what your name is and where you come from, but really understanding a little bit about you. I try and go into a lot of conversations really thinking I don't know very much at all and being open-minded and really trying to understand and be curious about those that I'm meeting along the way. And the third thing is feel the fear but do it anyway. If ever given the opportunity to adopt or go on an international assignment or engagement, my advice to everyone in this room is to absolutely do it without a question whatsoever. And that's something which I personally did myself, and it was career-changing for me and actually life-changing, and I want to share that story with you. So fast forward 2 decades, I've left South Africa, and I find myself in London. I've successfully completed the first 2 years of my career with Deutsche Bank. I'm given the opportunity to move to the Middle East, to Dubai. Much to everyone's dismay, people say, well, I think you're a bit crazy thinking about moving to the Middle East. You know, you're young, you're a female, you're single. Why would you possibly consider it? And the path of maximum resistance is one that I've pretty much gotten used to being on. So I took the opportunity, and I'm so glad that I did. So I moved to the Middle East and, embraced life in the Middle East with 100 other cultures and nationalities, and became part of a city which was living in harmony with over 100 different nationalities, which is really exciting to be a part of. A couple days after starting at my new gig, I was driving to work on the Sheikh Zayed Road. So anyone who's been to Dubai, you know that Sheikh Zayed Road is a road which runs between Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and it's a 7-lane highway on either side. I'm sitting in LA-style traffic, and we're at gridlock. I look to my left, and there is a gentleman sitting, strumming his fingers on his steering wheel, and he has a maple leaf hanging from his front mirror. I assume he's Canadian. I look to my right a couple moments later, and there's a gentleman throwing his hands up in the air, very passionate, smoking, has his window cracked open, and is speaking so loud on his loudspeaker, I can hear him from a 2-mile radius, as can everyone sitting in this traffic, and he's speaking Italian. In front of me, there's a gentleman who is very frustrated, who clearly wants to get to wherever it is that he's going to, and he has his hand on the horn. Now, I've come to realize, having lived in America for 2 years now, that is not something we do in America. You do not touch your horn unless there's an emergency. But in other cultures, it's actually a form of communication. So, I sit there for a minute, and I embrace where I'm at. My CQ muscle kicks in, and I'm actually quite happy to be surrounded by these different nationalities what would possibly be quite frustrating to most was kind of enjoyable to me, because I was embracing the fact that I was in this new city with all these different cultures around me. That very same principle of CQ is something which really helped me throughout my entire career in the Middle East. I was there for just over 10 years, and there was very often scenarios where I would have to walk into a boardroom or into a meeting, and I'd have to articulate a message myself and my team very clearly to be able to get it across to over 10 nationalities around that boardroom table. And you have one chance. So it definitely is something that I personally, through my story I'm sharing with you today, have seen benefits, and I think that it's something that you should think about looking more into. So why should you think about strengthening your own CQ? Well, before we can get into that, let's think about what is CQ. Let's level set for a second, and let's think about what is this definition of CQ. CQ is referring to obviously cultural intelligence, which builds onto the notion of emotional intelligence. And it's your ability to successfully cope and relate to and work with different cultures in any environment. When you think about CQ for 2020, as we think about and cast forward for next year, Tom Hood and the MA CPA and BLI often talk about the required skill sets that make you or set you apart as a CPA. This, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many research, a lot of the research out there is that CQ is something that definitely will set you aside, whether you're a CPA or not a CPA. Some of the things in which it's able to obviously help you do is it enables you to have effective interactions across different cultures. It allows you, with a high level of CQ, to manage teams internationally and diverse teams internationally more effectively. And if your firm is conducting an international engagement, you can do so more successfully and step into that engagement in a much more successful fashion. Let's face it, the world we live in today is definitely one that's global in nature. It is becoming increasingly borderless, and in order for us to set ourselves apart, we need to be willing to embrace new and adapt and embrace new skill sets. Cultural intelligence is one which enables you and your firm to set yourselves apart in exactly that way, to have a competitive advantage and differentiate yourselves by really honing down and enhancing this very fact. As a CPA firm, though, it's clearly obvious that fostering CQ within your own CPA firm will allow you to differentiate yourself and be more, globally be more effective. But what's more important is to think about this as how does it benefit your firm? In order to enable you as a CPA firm of the 21st century, by developing the CQ muscle, you truly are able to differentiate yourself, and it will be a factor that can truly promote innovation as well as growth in the organization. A lot of research has gone into the fact that by increasing the level of cultural awareness in your overall organization, you're able to have a high level of innovation that's stemming from your various different groups in your organization. Beyond that, I would say for everyone in this room, if you truly want to set yourselves apart as a CPA firm that is different from that potentially down the street, whether that's engaging with your international clients locally here in the United States, or potentially considering international engagements overseas or expanding your presence overseas, by having the right level of CQ within yourself and your firms, you will definitely be able to successfully pitch for, win, as well as thrive in international engagements. If you want to hear anything more about CQ, or this is something that you think is of interest, please do stop by, speak to me. I'm going to be at the Thomson Reuters booth for the next couple of days. Would love to hear your thoughts, would love to hear your feedback around this tool, and whether that's something that you think is going to be beneficial to you, to your firms. And thank you very much for your time.